mean, the introduction was so kind, Luca. Thank you very much again. It was so extensive. I don't quite know how I can add value to this, but I have to give a special mention relating to what you said yesterday. The Pfandbrief, as we know, the German version of the covered bond, 250 years old, wants to feel like a young teenager. You mentioned yesterday, and that happens every now and then, and that's exactly what BerlinHyp did when it issued its first digital Pfandbrief. In fact, a very innovative issuance, the second only after KfW in syndicated format under the German Electronic Securities Act. And I think that does not only make the Pfandbrief a young teenager, but officially qualifies as a Generation Z member. Putting jokes apart, I think we have 20 minutes, 25 minutes basically to take you through that journey. And I think that is all the hard work that Bodo did with his team. And then also try to basically take a step back and imagine what the future of the bond market and the capital markets union could look like. That's obviously a little more of an open discussion and maybe a thought-provoking exercise that ideally will carry on through the next couple of days. But having said that, my pleasure to introduce Bodo, formally head of funding and investor relations, but obviously much more than that. But he will tell you about it. Thank you very much.
Okay, thanks Patrick for the introduction. Thanks Luca for the introduction. To be honest, when I heard your words, I thought I'm wrong now in this spot. Somebody else must appear who deserves all this. But anyway, thanks a lot. What I would like to do together with Patrick in the next 15 to 20 minutes to take you on our journey that we experienced before issuing this first digital Pfandbrief, and then, of course, how it felt when we issued it and what we learned out of it and what we maybe can forward to you. And you can make use of it. So let's start with a quote, and this quote is now really from somebody who would have deserved to be announced, like Luca announced us. It's from Larry Fink, the CEO of BlackRock, and he said this in December of 2022. The next generation for markets, the next generation for securities will be tokenization of securities. So far, we haven't seen so much. We have seen some registered bonds here or there. We have seen some small little investment products here and there. We have seen the one or the other bigger security, but all standalone things. Not a mass market yet, but according to him, it will be. And I'm very convinced that he is right, because everything that we experienced during the last half year or so was very convincing, to be honest. And it showed a little bit how everything can be faster and more precise in the future. So on BerlinHyp, and that's just very brief. Maybe if you could read through this, what you probably couldn't, because it's written much too small for this little screen. You would find that there is written something about quite an old bank that is around for 150 years, that has always done one thing, that is lending for real estate, and always refinanced in the same way, that is by the issuance of Pfandbrief. So somehow a little bit conventional, traditional, old-fashioned, but we have another side too. Luca mentioned it already. We love to innovate at this bank. In 2015, we were the first to issue a green covered bond, then 500 million transaction, big thing. Newspapers were full of that. We also did other innovative things, like being the first issuer of a covered bond with a negative yield on it. Everybody said this is not going to work. After all, interest environment and interest development made it necessary that others adapt to this too. We were also the first to issue as a bank a sustainability linked bond, but now it was not referring to ESG, but with to digitalization. And what have we done exactly? We issued a 100 million covered bond, mortgage covered bond, on the 2nd of August that we announced 2 weeks ahead to have some time for marketing and speaking and engaging with investors. We have done this as a syndicated transaction. Patrick said it already. It was only the second one under this new act that we have in Germany, the Act on Electronic Securities. And we did that with 2 banks. LBBW was one of them. DK Bank, another institution from the savings banks family, was the second. And we used a private and fully commissioned blockchain that was provided by Seifert. Seifert is a Frankfurt-based fintech. And the specialty about Seifert is those banks that acted as syndicate banks are also among the owners of that. So it comes a little bit from the own family, and especially for a debut transaction, that gives a lot of comfort, saying, okay, these people are connected to the people that I work with, so most probably I can trust them, and we can trust them. Apart from that, we wanted that our transaction looks as normal as possible in the market. So despite it is not a benchmark size, all the other features were quite normal. It is rated by an external rating agency. It is priced on our existing covered bond curve. It was announced in the market before issuing it. And with a tenor of 3 years, we also chose a tenor that is not like with many other things that you see at the moment in the crypto area, more in the money market environment, but a rather proper bond tenor. Let's give you a little bit an overview about the infrastructure, because that might look confusing, and especially if you cannot see all the little fields that are on there, because it's too small. It needs some explanation, but it's important because the process of bringing something to the market via blockchain is simply different than doing it as a certificate within the bank and then giving it to a general custodian. So of course there's an issuer. You see that on the left-hand side. Then there is the one who provides the network, that is Seifert. So all the technical infrastructure is provided by that company. Then next thing is you have to make a decision as an issuer. Do you want to be directly on the blockchain, or do you want to use the node of somebody who is already boarded on? For the first time, we chose to be a tenant rather to have our own node. So we agreed into a contract and a service agreement with DK Bank. And were able to use their node. That means we could not see everything that happens on the blockchain, but more or less everything that referenced to our issuance. Then there on top, we have something very normal that you have in every transaction, our syndicate banks. We entered into an agreement with them. The field below that is very special, and you need that for electronic securities. You need to have somebody who is acting as a so-called crypto securities registrar. Why is this one so important? At this point where this entity comes into place and acts, the claim is really existing because in the end you have no certificate that you can hand over to anybody. The claim becomes effective in the moment when this crypto securities registrar transfers the right combined with the security from the issuer to the first investor. Then it only exists. And then, of course, you need investors. These investors do not have to be on the blockchain themselves, but their custodians have to be there. And if their custodians cannot in the short period of time, because they would need to get into agreements with Swayet, they can also have a sub-custodian agreement with a custodian, for instance, LBBW or Bank, who are already there. And we found out in our whole process that the investors are not so eager to be on the blockchain themselves, rather convincing their custodian, you do the work, you enter that, and then I can sign via you. So this describes our journey. It began basically in December of 2023. And since then, many things happened. And again, this is so small there where it says preparation of the transaction, but I'm very sure that Luca and Jenny are more than happy to provide you with all these material in the aftermath. And then you can read it through. So many things need to be prepared. You have to enter in all these agreements that allow you to become a tenant on the blockchain. That is a lot of legal work, but also work of understanding what you are signing in the end. You have to think of this is an issuance that is not drawn out of your MTN program. So you need a standalone documentation that you need to prepare. You need to commission a standalone rating for that because the rating agency usually only rates what is in your MTN program if you not do a separate commissioning. You have to involve your cover pool monitor, your trustee, of course, because he will act in a different way this time. He has no certificate where he can sign and say, okay, everything is prepared. There is enough cover assets in the cover pool for the issuance of this bond. But he has to do that in an electronic way. He has to make sure that his signature, digital signature, arrives at the crypto securities registrar. So best is to involve him before and to discuss with him how all this can be done. Then, of course, Luca mentioned that earlier, you need support in-house. So involve your management, your top management as soon as possible to offer that support, that you can ask others for favors in-house as well. So there's a lot to be prepared, and that allowed us then half a year later to mandate the two banks for the specific transaction. Preparation works after that went on, of course. Discussing with them new problems or challenges appeared. So it's good to have a little bit of time. Finally, we were able to announce that transaction and enter into dialogue. And that was super interesting. With being three banks, one issuer, two syndicate banks coming out of the savings banks family in Germany, one of the major focuses of this transaction was education of the savings banks and enabling to act in this market. And we got a huge response there. We were able to support them in starting their own new product processes in the aftermath. And we offered two different, one-to-many formats, one specifically designed for savings banks, another one for all investors. In total, 135 people took part in these in these two formats, and LBBW was on the KfW trade as well. They told me afterwards, you attracted more people with that than KfW you did, because of this approach towards savings banks. So very nice outcome for us, and allowing us in the end then to price the bond. Well, pricing was not really exciting in this case. The exciting period came thereafter, that was settlement. We allowed ourselves for T+2 settlement because we said, okay, we have never done this. Everybody told us same day settlement is possible, but maybe not with the first one, maybe not even T+1, but allow ourselves for T+2. And that was good, although everything worked. But just to see that everything worked and to know that in the future I could easily do at T+1 or even T+0 is a big benefit. And I think that is where the real value for all of us in this industry lies. We can save 5 days, save 5 days of interim refinancing that are costly. And then also, which is very nice from an investor, from an issuer point of view, on an electronic platform, blockchain-based, to see all the steps that are performed in real time. That was a great outcome. We have the process here on a different diagram again, and on the upper part, that is what happens in primary market. Downward side is what happens in secondary market. So there is a part that we chose to happen off-chain. That is everything that has to do with payment for the time being. KfW did exactly the same. I think in the future, when you have proper electronic central bank money, you can put that on-chain as well. The cover pool administrator, or cover pool monitor, it has to be named, not administrator. The administrator did not play any role in that process, is right on the border between off-chain and on-chain. Because what we did was having him giving, or he had to give his confirmation off-chain in a very traditional way, but without any paper. And then this was uploaded onto the blockchain and transferred to DK Bank as a crypto securities register. Everything else then happened on-chain. Yeah, some lessons learned, and now it really gets very tiny. So let me tell you what we learned. First of all, there are many investors who are curious to find out about this market, and they are right, but they need support because they need to go through new product processes, and therefore banks, syndicate banks should act as advisors to investors there. What you need to make this form of securities really successful is creating a level playing field towards certificate-based ones. At the moment, we have no ECB eligibility for them. They cannot be, at least not within the EU. In Switzerland is possible. Registered on a regulated stock exchange. That one you need, again, for being ECB eligible. Due to these facts, you will create lower volumes, and lower volumes means no LCR eligibility. Another thing that would be needed, especially to attract bank investors. But I'm sure, as we understand the ECB and other authorities right now, that everybody is very supportive and wants to create this environment that we need. And my forecast would be a little bit in the medium to longer term, say 5 to 10 years, this will be mainstream, and because it is so efficient. with these words, I think I would hand back to you, Patrick, and step aside.
Thank you so much. Have a seat. Have a drink. You well deserve it. Well, this is a reality, right? And now we're talking about fiction, how that could basically pan out going forward. And to just help digesting this a little better, we've tried to come up with not so innovative, way of illustrating this. The thing about regulation and education is quite interesting that Bodo said. If you spend time to explain to investors why on earth a AAA Pfandbrief of BerlinHyp issued in digital format needs to be treated differently, well, of course you spend a lot of time, because all those guys buying AAA Pfandbrief from BerlinHyp, they do without spending too much thought in all due respect, at least not as far as the risk is concerned, right? So in other words, regulation and education goes hand in hand. If there is a level playing field, it's way easier to explain this to all the guys that are already buying in the conventional world. And I think this is about the switching cost and the switching time it will potentially need to basically transform the conventional market into a digital market. Let's look into what there is. ECB eligibility, Bodo mentioned this. I don't see any, let's say, material reason why there should not be. I think LCR can be fixed the moment that the market is kind of deep enough. There is a possibility to do secondary market trading. We'll be engaging with some of those investors that were not quick enough to get ready for the digital issuance in the first place. And I think then the missing link, the big missing link and the big question around this is, of course, what happens with the ECB trials? If the ECB, and what they're doing at the moment is obviously running trials on repo transaction, on interbanking money market, and I think the target is quite clear, basically moving this to T+0. This basically means no settlement risk. You exchange bond versus cash immediately. And I think that is an extremely sexy proposition to remove risk out of the system and at the same time, obviously, make the whole thing way more efficient. Again, happy to listen to any controversial, let's say, questions around this on why sticking to T+7 on paper basis should be better. I don't buy into it. All right. So the question is, how much time will we need? Let's see. But I think the ECB, the moment they fix this problem, you have potentially a bit of a game changer. And I think the moment you can settle euros digitally for repo deals, getting from there to bond deals is not a long way to go, in my view. So again, and in our view, I'd like to say, Bodo. So in other words, regulation needs to fix a few things, and I think they're working on it. One of the crucial questions also, which Bodo didn't highlight so much about it, private blockchain versus public. I think that is also a bit under discussion, and you will have to figure out who will basically be dominating the market. I think the central banks have taken a bit of a more cautious view as to public blockchain, which is, again, the reason why you stick to the private one. Again, some clearance is needed, but again, with the potential to become fairly straightforward in a relatively short period of time, and that in exchange will make the education process much easier. Because again, in last instance, AAA Pfandbrief, 250 years old product, feels like a teenager and behaves like a teenager every now and then, but still is a AAA product. Let's not forget about this. And then there remains a scale, and that's about how long will we give time to the market to migrate from the one to the other. We are now at 0.003%, so we are moving extremely fast, but still have a bit of, let's say, way to go. The question is if that game changer could be changing, and we can look into, to cut this short in here, and saying what can we learn out of 10 years of sustainability, 10 years of green bond principles. At times, the covered bond market was somewhere around 30%. So the market can move. But the question is if that game changer on digital euro, the game changer on a capital markets union that claims and aims to have a European digital infrastructure can potentially make things faster. I think so. I think they will have to be faster to basically meet all of the policy requirements, all of the stuff that Draghi has been talking about that we will certainly be discussing tomorrow and day after tomorrow. So from that point of view, my conclusion is there is something to be learned from the transformation in sustainability, also in the digital world, the capacity to adopt to it, the capacity to get investors engaged, is something that has paid off on the long run. We probably have to try a little harder, but I think we're all in the very same boat. So having said that, thank you very much for your attention. We'll be running a roundtable on Thursday, where Bodo will be kindly sharing a bit of his experience looking back at the last 10 years. So if you're interested, join us and listen a bit more. And all of the data also, by the way, is available on the BerlinHyp website. So excellent wrap up of the deal. Having said that, thank you so much for your attention. And Luca, back to you.